Shakeman.
Welcome to Rockipedia. Tonight's featured artist, Motley Crue. Motley Crue was formed on January 17th, 1981, when bassist Nikki Sixx left the band London to begin rehearsing with drummer Tommy Lee and vocalist Greg Leon. The trio rehearsed for quite some time until Leon decided to move on. Lee and Sixx went in search to complete their band. They met Bob Deal, a.k.a. Mick Mars, when they put an ad in the L.A. Recycler. After he auditioned for the job, he was immediately hired as the guitarist. Now they were in search of a singer. Lee recommended a guy he'd known in high school and knew each other through the garage band circuit. Mars mentioned that he just saw this guy perform at the Starwood the other night in a band called Rock Candy. That guy's name was Vince Neil. Mars definitely recommended they offer him the spot, so the band did, only to be turned down by Neil. But after Rock Candy members started to join outside projects, Neil got nervous and left the band in search of another project. He shortly ran into Tommy Lee shortly after that, and Lee asked him again to join the band. Neil, being anxious to get into another project, joined the band on April 1st, 1981. No, it was not an April Fool's joke, as we all know to this point. The band was in need of a band name. Nikki Sixx suggested Christmas. The other guys were not crazy about the idea. Mick Mars told them a story that he remembered, an incident when he was in a band called White Horse, when a band member said, "We look like a motley-looking crew." And it stuck. They liked Motley Crue as the new band name. The band started its own record label called Leather Records and brought in their first manager, Alan Kaufman. They released 2 singles on their label, Stick to Your Guns and Toast of the Town. Later that year, it was time to release their first album. On November 1981, the first album was released, Too Fast for Love. Crue didn't get off to a great start they hoped for, only selling 20,000 copies of their debut album. Kaufman began to shop the band around for a major record deal, using the band's success on the LA Strip and LA area, finally landing a deal with Elektra Records in early 1982. The album was remixed by producer Roy Thomas Baker and re-released in August of 1982. With killer rockin' hits, powerful drumming in the songs like Piece of Your Action, Take Me to the Top, Public Enemy #1, and my favorite off the album, Livewire, the album lacks for the rest of the album, including the title track, Too Fast for Love, which Vince Neil sounded like a squealing pig. Besides the song Starry Eyes, which is not a bad song, the rest of the album lacks my interest, but besides a few fillers, I give it a 4 out of 5 stars. Their manager, Alan Kaufman, set up a tour in Canada, which is where the band started their bad reputation. Starting at the Edmonton International Airport, when the band were not allowed to board the plane when they were wearing their costumes that they were considered deadly weapons because of the spikes that they were wearing. They seized that along with Vince Neil's porn magazine collection, stating it was indecent. Finishing up with Tommy Lee throwing a TV out of a hotel room, which got the band banned from the city for life. If though the band got a lot of press from the Canadian tour, it ended in a financial disaster for the band. They decided to change management. They brought in a successful manager, Doc McGee, who managed Kiss and Bon Jovi to their success. In 1983, the band started to take off. After playing the US Festival, their popularity began to rise. Ozzy Osbourne noticed them and asked them to join his tour. The band did so well on the tour that they broke off to do own shows during that year. And then it was time to start plugging their second album release that was coming out in 1983 on September 26th, Shout at the Devil. Not only did the band's popularity grow, but their maturity of songwriting also did. The sophomore album definitely showed that this band was for real. Shout at the Devil is the band's best album to this very day, in my opinion. From beginning to finish, it's the band's masterpiece. From the self-titled track Shout at the Devil and their two hit singles, Looks to Kill and It's Too Young to Fall in Love, the album delivers from beginning to finish. This album rocks. My opinion, their best album without a doubt. I give it a 5 out of 5 stars. Reaching the 4 million mark sold, the album went 4 times platinum. And well deserved. On June 21st, 1985, the band's third album, Theater of Pain. It was very unlikely that the band was even going to come close to Shout, and they were dead on with that with this album, as the band turned totally glam and went really commercial on this album. Besides a few good songs with, of course, their ultimate ballad, Home Sweet Home, and a few decent songs like Louder Than Hell and Keep Your Eye on the Money, Fight for Your Rights. Besides that, the album goes into sleep mode. I give it a 2 out of 5 stars. On May 15th, 1987, the fourth studio album for the band, Girls, Girls, Girls. A more bluesy riffed album, which I give credit to Mick Mars for being a very creative on his guitar in this album. It's a real shame that the songwriting didn't do that creativity justice. And besides Wild Side and maybe the ballad All I Need, this album is boring and lacks my interest through the whole album. I give it a 1 out of 5 stars. This band definitely went cheesy on this album. September 1st, 1989 brings us the fifth studio album, Dr. Feelgood. Bringing in top dog producer Bob Rock for this one. Not a bad idea, by the way. The album became their top-selling album of all time, selling 6 million copies to date. Even though difficult to record at this time, where the bandmates were not getting along and going through their drug addictions and trying to stay sober, Rock decided to record them individually to get this album done. To step it up on this album, the songwriting did step up on this, and their skills, besides a few cheesy songs on this album, it's a good rock album. With rockin' riffs in the title track and Kickstart My Heart, a sing-along track, Same Old Situation, and ballads like Without You and Don't Go Away Mad, this album moved into third place of my top Crue albums. Good move bringing in Bob Rock on this one, guys. It's well produced. And besides, with half of the album being cheesy, I'll give it a 3 out of 5 stars. Working on material for the next album, Vince didn't like the material or the direction of the band, began losing interest and concentrating more on car racing. He did not participate with the writing of the band. He decided not to show up for rehearsals, and Vince Neil, shortly after, was fired from the band. Controversy went on back and forth saying that Vince Neil quit. The band fired him. It kept going back and forth till Vince did an interview shortly after and said, I was fired from the band. It didn't really matter at this point because the band just lost a key opponent of this lineup. It was handled badly by management. They didn't even step in to help. So the band moved on, bringing in a local boy from this area, guitarist, vocalist John Corabi. Which brings us to March 15th, 1994, self-titled album Motley Crue was released. The band's 6th album, talk about change. Wow. The band definitely went down a new road. With a new member coming in, they went experimenting with their music. At this point, grunge had taken over the rock scene, and I think that Crue tried to fit in at this point. Do I think they sold out and tried to be a grunge band? No, I don't think they went that far. But I just think it was an experiment that didn't pass the test. It was a dark, aggressive style album, totally different from the pop anthem style songs that the band was known for. As much as they tried to leave their past behind and be a new band, the fans reminded them that you can't leave a legacy like theirs and start a new path. The fans responded with poor record sales and ticket sales on the tour, which stopped the tour short. The fans weren't not interested in the new Motley Crue. John Corabi felt the rejection and encouraged the band to get Vince back, that he was the signature sound of Motley Crue. Taking the advice of Corabi and management, the boys all sat down in a meeting, worked out their tiffs, and reformed. Wish they would have worked a little harder on the material for the next album, which brings us to June 24th, 1997. It was the band's 7th album release, Generation Swine. Generation Swine, a rat race from outer space. Gotta blow your mind. Gotta get away, gotta get away. Not the comeback I or the fans wished for. This album was horrible. Not a good song on this crappy album. A total flop. They even destroyed an old song by re-recording it and kind of vamping it up a little bit. Shout at the Devil, and they called it Shout at the Devil 97. It was horrible. Please give me a barf bag, please. The signature voice of Crue returned, but it didn't even have a chance to prove with this disaster. The fans were very unhappy about this album, but were great to see Vince back. But please, just play all the old classics on this next tour, guys. Please, don't play any of them songs off this trashy album. Generation Swine was a complete... I would take the last album with the other guy over this one. This album was complete trash, garbage. I could not believe they put an album out like this with the return of the signature voice of Motley Crue. I don't even want to waste any more time on this. I'm not even giving it any stars. I give it a complete flop. Move on. July 11th, 2000, the band's 8th studio album, the titled New Tattoo.
Tonight is the very first night I'm alive with you. Until the day I die, I promise it's true. Everyone will see my new tattoo.
Since the reunion, Vince and Tommy still never resolved all of their problems. Also, Tommy was having problems of his own in his marriage to Pamela Anderson. So bad it winded his skinny ass up in jail on a domestic abuse charge. While in jail, he decided to tell the boys he didn't tell the boys. He had his management call the boys to let them know he will not be returning to Crue when he finishes off his jail sentence. So, they brought in longtime friend of the band and Ozzy drummer Randy Castillo to play on this album. Even great drumming couldn't save another crappy album. I was convinced now that this band's creativity and skills have left them behind. Besides 2 decent tracks, Hell on High Heels and Punched in the Teeth by Love, this is another snoozer. Not going to waste any more time on this. I think I'll give it 1 star just for the 2 cool tracks on it. Next. It took another 8 years before they gave it another shot at a new album. I was hoping that they just gave up on writing and just continued to go out and tour their classics. But, without doubt, June 24th, 2008, the 9th studio album was released, Saints of Los Angeles.
We are the saints. We signed our life away. Doesn't matter what you think. We're gonna do it anyway. We are the saints. One day you will confess and pray to the saints of Los Angeles.
With the return of Tommy Lee, the band gave it one last try of creating music together. They almost achieved it, too, with some hints of the old Crue sound on this album. With the title track and songs like Face Down in the Dirt, Chicks Equal Trouble, Going Out Swinging, the band returned closely to the roots, but was happy to see that they weren't writing new material for another album after this one. I give this a 3 out of 5 stars just for the effort of trying to get some of that old Crue sound back. This band has faced a lot of turmoil through very turmoil things going on in the band, starting with Vince Neil facing a manslaughter charge by vehicle in 1984 when he drove his fast car drunk a few blocks away from his apartment to the liquor store, killing his best friend Razzle, who was in the passenger seat. He served 18 days of a 30-day sentence and a $2 million fine. He also lost his daughter to cancer at the age of 4. In 1987, Nikki Sixx died of a heroin overdose, only to be brought back to life within minutes. He kept a diary of his life on drugs and put out a book called The Heroin Diaries, heroin that is, in 2006. He was almost hit by a lawsuit in 1988 when his doppelganger man, Matt Tripp, that is a guy that goes out and scores drugs for you, by the way, in case you didn't know who that is. A long battle in court, but Matt Tripp decided to drop the charges after the long battle, seeing that it was going nowhere. Their lifestyles even forced their managers not to allow them to tour in Europe ever again, for they would have returned in body bags, they said. This band definitely had an up and down career. The band decided to call it quits on January 28th, 2014. The band announced a 70 North American date farewell tour. They signed a cessation of touring agreement, which prevents them from ever touring as Motley Crue ever again beyond 2015. The band ended its farewell tour with its final show where it all began for them in Los Angeles at the Staples Center on December 31st, 2015. The band reunited in late 2018 to head into the studio to write and record new tracks for their new movie release set for the spring of 2019. Well, here we are. We're on the first day of spring, and the movie will be on Netflix this Friday night. Six and Neil both said don't rule out the band ever getting together to record new material in the future. Even though the band could never tour as a band again, as Motley Crue, this band will go down as some of the most controversial bands and bad boys of rock and roll. But they will go down as one of the top rock bands in history, and I would say definitely the most notorious rock bands of all time. Thank you for joining us for Rockipedia. We'll catch you next week.